Where better to discuss the latest trends in British society than on the Riviera, the Essex Riviera that is, and nowhere more lovely than Canvey Island. So this think tank called Demos, which frankly is full of la-di-da Gunnar Graham types, has had a go at people like me, white and over 55. You could call us pale and stale, if not necessarily male. Our views are a mixed bag, some of them perhaps a bit too miserablist, worrying about the decline of Christianity, worrying about do-gooders. On the other hand, what's wrong with thinking about family? What's wrong with believing that you should respect people? Eh?
We moved out of London into council houses from the Old Kent Road, and we moved...
Dee and Kath have known each other virtually their entire adult lives. By the way, are you sisters or you're just mates, yeah?
Friends for the last 50 years, yeah.
50 years? When did you meet? When did you meet?
Met when I was a waitress in a nightclub.
I was about 18
London.
when we met in London, because we lived in London.
Was life better then?
Easier.
Oh, was it really?
Easier, yeah, I think it was easier. I mean, your husband's went and worked.
Yeah.
I just think it was just easier.
You didn't. I don't think you wanted for much. I mean, your main thing in life was that you had a roof over your head, and your kids were at school and they had a job when they came out of school. I mean, that was the main thing then.
The Demos report quoted dozens of people across the country. Here's one. What were you respectful of then that you see that kids are not respectful of now?
Well,
things get handed if you're all sitting around the table, which I mean we do, and you sit all round the table, but you've not just got the adults around the table, you've got the children as well. So you're passing on knowledge, respect, or
love.
Love. Yeah. I mean, you know, you absolutely
caring about one another
and showing them which way to go.
Sitting on this bench dedicated to his late wife, we came across Brian. Do-gooders. Too many do-gooders. Our group think that. Do you think that?
I'm not sure on that one, about do-gooders. I don't meet many in my life. I meet a lot of people who are helpful in many ways. You know, in terms of the friendship I've had through what's happened to me, I've had some really good friends. Would you call them do-gooders? No, I don't think so.
You can't go to Canvey Island without going down the boozer. The survey said that older whites were not great at naming politicians. True?
Name a politician.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher.
She's dead. Name a living one.
Is any of them living? You tell me.
They're all dead.
Steve?
Theresa May.
You're the intellectual here. Go on, do another one.
Tony Blair, Cameron.
You're listing half the cabinet now. Actually, none of them are. Theresa May's in it, the others are out.
Cameron, the traitors.
Why are your grandkids less optimistic about their futures than you were when you were little?
Well, I think basically it comes down to the immigration side of things. There's less and less jobs for our kids anymore, you know? And that's why I see it anyway.
What about chances of buying a house?
Same thing.
Are people more respectful of authority now or when you were little?
I think they're much less respectful. Since they took the cane away from school, and teachers are not allowed to punish children. Parents now, they seem to let their kids get away with anything. I mean, years ago, I had more respect for my parents than to get up. I mean, I got up to loads of skullduggery, but I never took it at home. It never went to my door. I had more respect for my mum and dad, whereas the kids nowadays don't seem to care. They've got no respect for anything.
As far as capturing the views of Canvey Island was concerned, the survey was spot on.
John Sweeney there. Well, we're joined by Sophie Gaston, who's the acting director of the Demos think tank, which is behind today's report. Also with us is Danny Lockwood, the publisher of the Press newspaper, which covers Dewsbury and Batley in West Yorkshire, and Areeq Chowdhury, who's the chief executive of WebRoots Democracy, a digital democracy organisation. It's lovely to have you all here. And if I just start with you, Sophie, from what you've heard from Canvey Island today, does that reflect the sort of voices that you were putting together in that report?
Absolutely. I mean, the key theme that came out of all the focus groups that we did was the sense that Britain is fundamentally on the wrong track and that people have really utterly lost faith in the capacity of politicians to shape and improve their lives. For people today, life feels stressful, it feels precarious, and there's a real sense of mourning around things that have been lost.
Danny, I'm going to come to you, this idea of the wrong track. If we can just pull up some of the quotes, and these are verbatim quotes, so that, you know, they don't necessarily sort of all read very obviously, but let's just pull up one of those quotes now. There are too many do-gooders around. We saw a little bit of that in the film, didn't we? To tell you what you can't do rather than tell you what you can do. Now, what does that say to you?
Well, that speaks to me right off the top of the nanny state, really.
Right.
But I think it also kind of lies within this political correctness that is also kind of invading every element of life. And I'm not surprised that old people feel as though they're being blamed for getting old. They've sustained the NHS for years, but they suddenly feel as though they're a burden on it. And I think that when they're used to having a sense of community and a place in life they've seen disappear.
When you say political correctness, what does that mean?
Well, I can only go to my experience and to say that we've seen radical socio-economic, cultural shifts in our town, and community has gone, and it's been replaced by, if you like, the diktats of whether it's political or judicial or local authority and administration that seems to elevate every real or imagined minority, its values and rights above theirs. And I think that they are being told and are sick of being told that their values and their traditions and their cultural heritage is worthless.
Areeq, do you recognise that as being a corrosive element?
I mean, I wish we lived in a politically correct society, if I'm honest. I don't think we do at all. I mean, I view political correctness as having basic respect for one another. I mean, we used to talk about this as political correctness gone mad, and now we just say political correctness. You know, and I read the report, there were some people talking about how, you know, we're not really a Christian country anymore. But I wish we lived in a country that practiced, you know, Christian values of, you know, love thy neighbour, do unto others as you would have do unto you. And that's really what, you know, political correctness is about. I mean, political correctness, when you boil it down, is about it's about, you know, freedom of speech. And personally, you know, I think freedom of speech doesn't mean that you can simply say whatever you want about you know, something without there being consequences. So for
while we're talking about freedom of speech, I have to apologise to our viewers for that.
Perfectly illustrates my point, right? So I say something and there's a consequence. And my reason for saying that is, you know, people are annoyed about political correctness, but what it's really about is you're free to say whatever you like in the society.
But isn't that the point, that these people don't feel they have that voice?
They can, right? You look at any newspaper, you can say whatever you like in society, that's freedom of speech. But there are consequences to that. If you say something that I deem to be racist or I deem to be bigoted, I'm then free to call you out on that. That is the consequence. I can call you out as being sexist or homophobic or you know, Islamophobic.
I think it's deeper than that. I think that is kind of
but that's what people talk about in this report.
An intellectual examination of it. These people are talking about their real lives, their real experiences, about the communities being broken up, about the landscape that their families have known for generations and generations being supplanted.
This changes throughout history. There's no monopoly.
That doesn't mean
British
to say
society
that when it happens in as condensed a period of time as we're witnessing now, and we really are, and these people are bearing witness to it, that they have a right to be disaffected by it and to feel that they're not being represented.
I don't want to break the conversation up. I just want to take the next quote and bring it into here. So if we can just pull up the next one. This is about, I would say, cultural identity. If we can just pull this one up, which says, my husband's got a van and it's got an English flag, England flag. He actually got pulled up the other day by somebody and they said, why have you got an English flag on your van? I'm reading the rest of it here. Sophie, to bring you in, is this part of a bigger conversation about the flag and about patriotism or jingoism or discomfort with that. What did you hear?
There was a huge amount of discussion about English cultural and national identity, and it wasn't just the flag, it was also St George's Day, it was all of these different things. And I think a lot of citizens were telling us, we feel that the political classes have branded these as somehow racist or a symbol of intolerance or exclusion. And then they're thinking, hang on, we have to constantly adapt and welcome all these other nationalities. And what we start to see here is cultural pluralism creating this kind of zero-sum game.
Let me start on this one then, if I can, with you, Areeq. Do you find the England flag, St George's flag, does it make you feel uncomfortable?
Depends who's waving it, right? I mean, I think it's not been made racist, by the way, by immigrants or politicians. It's been made racist by the likes of the EDL and the BNP with regard to the British flag. And that's because those are racist organisations which use that flag as their brand. And when it comes to what you see on TV, you know, apart from the World Cup, you're going to see the England flag and EDL demo on the news, right? That's the problem there, I think.
Yeah, I have a real problem with that, because I think that this is just a symbol that is branded by people like Emily Thornberry when she ridiculed an England football supporter in 2014. And it goes to the... Yeah, but you know what? She's symbolic. She's not suffered for... Her career hasn't suffered for it, has it? But the thing is this, I think that is just a symbol of the wider problem, which is that we've got schools now where the educational establishment is basically teaching our kids, brainwashing our kids, that, you know, this isn't a country you can be very proud of.
Would you feel...
No school is brainwashing their kids.
Would you feel able to put a flag up in the window? Would you...
I would, well, in my case, it would be a Yorkshire flag, but I wouldn't have a problem about that. I'm proud of, you know, my county, my country, and the United Kingdom.
So you don't feel that part has been shut down?
I would do it just to be awkward, but I would know that there'd be people
That's Yorkshire awkward.
Yeah, but there would be people who would be passing judgment on me because I was showing a symbol of patriotism, and I find that really is horrific. And
so you should address the issue, right, which is that people have, you know, taken that flag and turned it into meaning something, you know, that to some people seems racist, and that's the real issue. Whereas what we see in society are people are then twisting that into being, oh, these immigrants are coming here, changing our cultural identity, but that's not true at all, right?
I'm going to bring in another quote now, if we can. This is about immigration, and again, I'll start with Sophie, just to put this in sort of context for us. The immigrants that got in now, they're not working, or they're working for their money and sending it off. Does that fit into the kind of quotes and feedback that you were getting?
So absolutely. I mean, we saw very few expressions of overt racial prejudice in these focus groups. Even when a space was created, a safe space for people to express those kinds of views, there just wasn't that kind of feeling. But what there was a very strong expression of what I would call welfare chauvinism. The idea that some people should have access to our social state and others shouldn't. And the people who have the access, it should be earned by their social and economic contribution.
I enjoyed this report because I felt it felt like Sophie was sitting listening to me and my buddies at the bar in the pub. But on this one, I do think anything like this risks presenting cliches and stereotypes, and I kind of see that as one of those, because what came out of the report that I really liked was the fairness that was identified, you know, quite broadly among people.
Do you think that's not fair? You hear that quote and you think it's not fair?
I think that I can see why that would grab a headline and would be picked out, but I don't think that the report even says that that's typical. And I really liked the finding that, you know, these people from a specific demographic were not overtly racist. And I do think that fairness and that get on with it attitude that shone through in the report is absolutely the generation of people that I still respect.
When you hear the immigration argument, do you think it is about race, or do you think it can be about economic or what's called welfare chauvinism?
I think it's racist, personally. But then, going back to the free speech thing, I feel worried to say that concerns about immigration are racist. But when it comes to this, I think this is a caricature of what Britain is like. I mean, people are sold an idea, normally through the media, about immigrants coming here, taking jobs, taking housing. The reality is completely different to that. Lots of immigrants, work hard and are doing jobs. My whole family are working in the NHS. My brother's a junior doctor. The other point about this we're never going to be able to cover in this segment is I always find the irony of Britain being annoyed about people coming to their country and taking their resources when the richness of this country is built on, centuries of the British Empire going to other countries, ignoring borders, ignoring people, taking their money.
Danny.
There we go. Let's drag up 250 years of empire.
Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we?
And beat the people who I think made this country great.
What, the British Empire?
And a very welcoming and safe place on the whole for migrants. I come from
you think the British Empire that killed millions of people was a good thing for migrants?
So we'll all go back and we'll apologise for everything all the way back to
this is a key part there. This is very, you can't just ignore, if you want to be British nationality,
are we talking about politicians today trying to re-engage with a whole swathe of the country that has just disengaged and that thinks that all politicians are basically self-serving liars? Because that's what this report tells us. And I actually think that the politicians are missing a trick.
Sophie, what do politicians do with this now? I mean, you can hear such clear divides now between how people perceive the same sort of, grievances or injustices.
Yes.
What would if you were a politician saying, how do we make, or even Danny, both happy?
I think what was really striking for me is there's been a lot of conversation around intergenerational warfare between the young and the old as this sort of really primary schism in our society. And I think what this shows is that even amongst the older generations, there are very clear conflicts here. There are the people who are sort of willing, if not enthusiastic, about embracing change and handing over to the next generation. And then there are the people who really continue to see themselves as the dominant and authentic voice of British values in the heart of Britain and are very actively resistant to change. And I think it's the political decisions about whether to favour or to try and reconcile these two, or to take leadership to take us in a completely different direction, that will ultimately define where we go.
Or at least recognise the concerns.
Absolutely.
Recognise the concerns, but address the underlying issue, which I think media has warped as being blame on immigrants rather than blame on those who are warping British identity.
I think that suits your agenda.
We'll have you back at the next report. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And even after the watershed, I still have to apologise again. Falls to me to say sorry. We're not allowed to swear on here unless we warn you first.